Alrighty everybody, welcome back to the Hunter Call of the Wild. We are going to do a pretty hefty video today. It's going to be a very in-depth situation. We're going to talk about all the aspects that kind of go through grinding as far as how to do it, how to set up for it, what it's going to cost you, and just like some of the finer details of it, like how hunting pressure can affect things and how to manage your hunting pressure, things you can do, getting to know your map, your rares, the intended species. We're going to talk about like how and where and how far away to set up your tents and structures, the route, weapons, skills, perks, what you should or should not be shooting, troubleshooting. We're going to get into that as well. We're going to talk about, you know, how many kills it should take, why and what you should choose to do with some stuff. How do you know when you're getting close to your desired trophy spawning, and what to do when it does? We're going to talk about everything. This video might get split into two parts, just depending on how long it is. I don't want to put out like a 40-minute video for you guys, because that can be a lot. I know from like myself personally, I don't really enjoy watching videos much over that 30-minute mark, depending on if it's a video or if I'm rewatching an old live stream. Now, as you can see here, this mule deer does look a little bit different from his buddies. I am personally doing a mule deer super rare grind. That's the grind that I'm on, and that's the grind that I'm going to use for an example for you guys. I did just start this grind. We're less than 50 kills in, probably. So he's a pretty early spawn right there. I think he is the dilute variant, because he does still have that dark spot on the top of his butt at the base of his spine, so I'm pretty sure he's a dilute. But we're going to talk first about just kind of getting to know your map, getting to know the intended species. So you're going to start off looking for your zone locations and your zone times. I'm choosing to hunt in the drink zone just because that's the easiest way to do it for me and for the species I'm hunting, because for the mule deer, you can pretty much draw a line right through the center of Rancho, and the mule deer are all going to be on this eastern side. I've gone through and I've started to set it up. I've got like the 3 itty-bitty lakes all set up the way that I like them to. This one I feel like I have too much going on. This one I'm okay with. But these ones, and then I think this coastline of this lake, I still have to work a lot on. But I figure I could probably work on some of the other spots before we get there. And we'll talk more about that later. So you're going to want to get to know the zone location. So that's what I talked about with drawing a line down the center of Rancho. This is where my mule deer are going to be. As far as zone times, I already had this zone here, and that tells me that mule deer drink from 14 to 17, which is 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm not hunting at night. I'm not hunting super early in the morning. It's kind of nice. You're going to want to get to know these scores of the animals that you're hunting, and as far as what they need for a score estimate to make certain medal ratings. Now for the mule deer, let me just double check before I say it incorrectly. The mule deer, they are going to make silver at 98.3. They're going to make gold at 220.5, and diamond at 312.1. Their max level is 5 medium. Their max weight is 210 in kilograms, which is the system that I run my game in. You're going to want to get to know your map as far as which direction the wind tends to blow. For me, on Rancho, it tends to blow south, with the only exception, I think, being over here. It blows a little bit more west. Now, that's just kind of covering most of it. You want to know, like, what kind of nearby zones you have for your animals as far as early and late zones. So you want to know how close they're feeding or resting near the drinking zones, if that's what you're hunting. You want to kind of have an idea of where some of those are. So for me, up here, I think I have a mule deer zone right there that happens right before they're drinking. So if I fast travel here, they're still within view. They're just going to be, you know, hanging out a little bit, taking a little nap before they come down and get their drinks. I have another zone, I'm not sure which one it is because of the directions that I'm facing is still getting kind of confusing to me when I fast travel to different zones. Now, one of the biggest helpers that I personally use when I'm setting up a grind, when I'm getting to know a species that I don't hunt that often, I'm going to use the Call the Wild Guide app, and that is CotW Guide, and this is on iOS. I believe they have an app, Android version. It's called the Call the Wild Companion app. Search it. It's free from the App Store. They're pretty good about updating it after new stuff comes out. So like right now we do have Emerald Coast, Australia. You can click on that and you can scroll through all the species, and the homepage of each reserve has your wildlife sorted alphabetically. It shows me the wildlife, the little logo that they have. So like when I spot this mule deer again, that icon under mule deer, that's on there. It tells me the diamond rating, what class they are, and the max weight in kilograms. And for species like fallow deer that have a great one, it'll say max weight 100 kg, and then it'll have a slash and it'll say 140 kg, and that's for, you know, the great ones. Mule deer don't have a great one, so I don't really have to worry about that with these guys. But if you were to scroll further down on the app on a reserve page, you can see I'm going to call it a graph loosely, but it's the list of the species, again, in alphabetical order, but this time across its time. So it starts at midnight and then it runs until obviously 23:59. But it's little tiny icons, whether they are drinking, resting, or feeding, and you can go through the whole thing and just slide across, pick time, and like if I were to start up a map but I didn't want to change the time and it was 1400, so I could swipe over, look at 2 o'clock, scroll down, and I can see feral goat are finishing up their drink time. Hog deer are in the middle of their drink time. Feral pig, red deer, and stubble quail will all be feeding, and everything else... Oh, bantang as well. Everything else is resting. So it gives me an idea of where I might need to go to look for stuff. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see some wildlife, need time, weapons, setting, and reserves tabs. But the reserves are, again, sorted in alphabetical order, not in the order of release, which can be a little confusing because I'm used to thinking of the order of reserves as order of release. So we're going to talk next about what it costs to set up a full grind. So for your tents, each reserve you can have up to 16 tents, costing all at 16,256 in-game dollars. It is a lot, which is why it's very important to have a way to get money pretty fast, and you can do that with missions, you can do that with grinding something else that you already have a setup for. And if you don't have a setup for something, we are going to be putting out a video in between this and whatever the second one might be, or right after this, if this is one video, and we're going to be talking about easy ways to gain money in the game. So as far as hunting structures, and I'm going to use just the word structures because we're going to talk about all the different ones that we have in the game. So I'm going to get out of my little tripod and I'm going to fast travel to a tent. And we're going to, get in the storage, get in the store, and we're going to look at some stuff as I talk about this. So, in the store, you've got your portable structures. Your tents, all varieties, are 16,000. For your full setup of 16 tents, again, that is 256,000 in-game dollars. And then for your hunting structures, you can have any type of hunting structure up to 32 total. So I could have 30 ground blinds and 2 layout blinds on my map. I could have 15 waterfowl blinds, 15 tree stands, and I could have 2 tripods. As long as it adds up to 32, that's how many you can have, and that does add up to 512,000 in-game dollars. But there are 2 exceptions to the rule. Those exceptions are going to be your waterfowl blinds. These are 8,000 each. And your ground blinds, the original blinds in the game, these are also only 8,000 each. So if you do want to save money, the ground blinds and the waterfowl blinds are a great option because that cuts your costs in half to now match the cost of the tents, which is 256,000 for 32 of those. And as far as your ammo goes, this is going to be another cost that you do kind of have to run into for a grind. But as far as cost of ammo goes, you're going to have like a minimum of free if you want to use the 243 soft point bullets, all the way up to 2,660 if you wanted to grind with the 470, which it's completely up to you on what weapon you choose to grind with. You do just kind of have to keep in mind knowing what class your animal is and whether or not certain ammunitions might cause you to lose a metal rating, and that is one thing to keep in mind, as well as there are many people who will grind red deer with the 300. It's not an ethical weapon for them, but it does drop them pretty fast. But you do kind of run the risk of, if you're you know, shooting a red deer in the shadows, you might make the mistake and shoot a melanistic and then lose a metal rating on it. So that's going to cover most of the costs that you're going to run into with setting up a grind. And if you know, want to buy a new weapon or a new scope or something, that's a little different. But those aren't going to necessarily be reoccurring costs that you're going to run into. So next we're going to talk about getting to know your herds and getting to know your animals on your maps. So this will come with finding your zones and kind of working on, you know, where stuff is. You're going to get to know your herds, like, just by doing it, really. So I'm over here on this side of the map where I don't have a tripod because this is not a spot that I plan to shoot from. This is more so a tent just to make it easier so I don't have to walk around all of this or all of this to get over here. So we're going to fast travel back to where we were at the start. So you're going to get to know, you know, where are your males? Where are your female-only herds, if you have them? Which zone markers are herds? Which zone markers are singles? And some of those single zones are going to be 2 or 3 single bucks all together, and I refer to those singles as the roommates, because they're living together, but they're not actually together. And then you've got some zone markers that might be 3rd, 5th, 7th wheels, essentially, which is the name that I give them. So that'll be like a herd, like this, but say that that dilute is not actually part of the herd, he's just a single zone on top of the herd. So they might share this one little icon, but it's actually 2 herds, so therefore he is himself like a 3rd wheel, effectively. And you're going to want to kind of get an idea of which direction that your herds come in from, which direction they head out to. So I know that this herd here with the dilute, they walk in and render in for me over here, but then they walk behind all of this tree line until they get to where their zone actually is. I don't know which direction they walk out. I haven't finished a rotation here yet. I haven't really done a full rotation yet. It's been kind of touch and go. We're trying to figure some stuff out, but since he is right about perfectly 300, I need to switch my loadout. I was testing some other stuff out and apparently forgot to do that. That is another helpful thing to do, though, is to set up a very, like, specific loadout just for the grind that you want to do. So, as we can see here in my storage, I've got all 10 loadouts paid for and unlocked. So I have one for moose and bear, small animal, general, bow, bird, and then I have a bear grind, which I don't know why I have moose and bear and then bear grind. And then I have money grind, fallow grind, and mule deer grind. So we're going to switch to my mule deer grind. I'm using that one right now. I don't know if I'm going to continue using it. I just, at the moment, picked it because I had some extra leftover ammunition and I was running a little low on in-game cash after buying my setup. So it meant I didn't have to buy ammo for a little bit, at least. So we're going to hop up here and we're going to shoot this guy. And then we're going to talk about, like, the next kind of batch of topics. And it's going to be how to set up your tents and tripods and, well, tents and hunting structures. And planning your route. So he is right about 300 perfectly. I usually don't have many issues shooting the zone. Let's see. It seems I might have missed vitals, which that's fine. Since I seem to have missed vitals on him with the M1, I've noticed that the mule deer will come back at like the 0 to 25% health. So I'm not too worried about it, but over here, I know that these are pretty much all females, and then there is, I think, one really small buck somewhere. I think he may have not shown up yet. That's fine. But, you know, with your 16 tents and your 32 hunting structures, you might not need 32 hunting structures. I think I've got, like, 7 total. Tripods placed right now, but I'm gonna let him go right now because I don't think he will go down. So we're gonna go up here to this small lake. So as far as planning your route goes, you want to kind of have an idea of where you want to start your run, where you want to end your run. Is there a better path by chance? Because for me, I like to start my runs at this little lake, hit here, hit the lower Hacienda Lake, Bosque Alto, and then I try and do my best to hit these just because they're not set up all that great. And I'd rather spend more of my time in the zone, like working on the lakes that I know that I have like set up and they're ready and I'm okay with the way that they run. So some of the things that you're going to want to look into as far as efficiency goes: how much are you using to run in between zones? How much time are you using to pick animals up? How long does it take you to complete a run? Like, are you able to complete a rotation in a single drink time? Which, that is usually pretty feasible after you've kind of gotten your rhythm down. Sometimes it's a little off and you might miss like 3 zones or so before you've got to change time anyway. And sometimes you know, your grind will get to a point where you can do 2 rotations in a single drink time, but there are certain animals who have a shorter drink time than that's necessarily plausible to happen. So you want to talk about, you know, are you moving too slow? Are you moving too fast? And the cost of changing time if you're moving too fast is another factor that you're going to kind of have to consider. That's why I do try to use as many tents as possible, because changing time at a tent will always be about half the cost of changing time at an outpost. And so there's a shooter buck for me right now. He is not, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But as far as setting up your tents, I like to have my tents at least 200 meters away from the zone that I plan to hunt. My tripod's around 150, if I can. Obviously here I'm shooting across the lake just because of the way that it's set up. But some of these smaller lakes, like this tripod was for 2 zones here, this tripod is for this zone. I have a tripod here, but this zone is no longer here. It was just a single. He kind of left. But we're going to get out the M1, and I'm going to try and get this shooter buck, wherever he is. And now you can see with the spotting information, I can see that he is about 160 meters away from me. I'm zeroed for 150. I'm not going to hold very high. I seem to have hit the tree. And that is one thing you are going to have to kind of figure out if you're using a newer weapon. So this M1 is a fairly new weapon to me. So I'm not super familiar with the way that the bullet drop works with it. We did get him. I missed that time. Yep. Well, he'll come back next round and we'll try again. I'm clearly not very great with this. The M1 is definitely not a weapon I am familiar with. So we'll try this little lake here. And that is, you know, kind of leading into something that we'll talk about in a moment here. But one of the things with, like, how long it takes you to complete a run, some of that can factor from when you want to pick up your animals. Like, do you want to pick up your animals immediately after they are down? Do you want to pick them up at the end of a single run? Do you want to pick them up at the end of a couple of runs? There's a couple of options, and each one of them kind of has some pros and cons. So if you want to pick up your animals immediately after you shoot them, if you don't have the tents set up, so if I have this tent up here for me to spawn, and I don't have a tent down there for me to fast travel to pick the animals up, that can cost me like 2 or 3 minutes, which is like, you know, 5 or 10 of the in-game time. So that can kind of cut into how fast I can do a rotation. If you want to do it at the end of a single run, I think that's a really good option for a lot of people, because you can go through, you can, you know, shoot all the bucks that you want to shoot, and then you can not have to worry about staying within drink zone time, and you can go back and you can pick them all up, and then you can change the time, and with that amount of time, you're most likely going to get the cheapest cost of changing time. And, you know, if you're fast enough that you can get about 2 rotations in a single drink time, you have an opportunity to go through technically 1.5 times before you pick anything up. I know a couple of people who won't pick their animals up until they've been through and they've shot every male off of their map. So that's going to be like 2 or 3, maybe 4 rotations for them before they start picking stuff up. And that does kind of cause some issues with me and how I prefer to grind, because for me, that would mean I might be fast traveling to places and wasting, you know, 3 to 5 minutes waiting and looking for males that I've already shot, but I forgot about it. I don't have the greatest memory when it comes to that stuff. It all just kind of blurs together after a little while. But, you know. This grind I did just start, so I've still got a pretty good idea of where I have been, where I haven't been, and what still needs to be shot. There we go. Let's try for this guy, and hopefully I can get a mule deer down for you guys. He does have a little lady friend in there. I'm gonna go... Oh, I thought I would get a follow-up. I didn't. Alright, well, we actually got a mule deer down, but this is a good example. So I'm reloading immediately as soon as I get out of there. Because I've fired twice, and because of the distance from my stand to this zone, these guys do flee if I fire twice. If I only fire once, they all go pretty much alarmed. Unless they're right in here where I can't quite see them when I'm in the tripod. Those ones will typically flee after the first shot. But you want to kind of get an idea of which directions your animals are fleeing, because that can set you up for opportunities of, if I wanted to put a tent over there, I would maybe put it out here in the open because that herd flees that way. So I might get a second shot at another buck as they're fleeing when I'm coming over to pick up just one. Next, we're going to kind of talk about what weapons you want to use. So as you've clearly seen, I'm not that great with the M1. I'm really not. So that's something to talk about, is like, is it reliable? Are you comfortable using it? Is it the correct class? Again, with people using the 300 for harvesting red deer, it's not a bad thing. It's just you do have some risks that you're going to run with it, like if you happen to shoot a deer that you didn't exactly mean to shoot with it, you're going to lose the medal rating. Will it allow for follow-up shots or multiple harvests in a single zone? So the M1, I'm sure if I get better with it, it would allow me to do that. But at this point, I can get 1, maybe 2 deer out of a zone. Not very often. And as far as follow-up shots, something like the original 7mm that is base game doesn't really allow you for follow-up shots because it is a single-shot break-action weapon. A lot of bows and crossbows aren't going to give you the offer for follow-up shots just because that reload animation does take long enough that if they're that close, they're really going to spook, so you're not going to have that opportunity. And that is something to kind of consider. And then another thing to really kind of look into is, can you afford the ammo as far as the cost per pack of 10 compared to cash per animal harvest. So if I was using... You know, this is not an ethical weapon for it, nor do I really recommend it. If I was using the 470 to grind mallards, you're gonna get like 200 to 300 in-game cash per mallard, but it's gonna cost you, you know, $2,660 to buy 10 rounds. And the way that that kind of factors out, you're not really gonna be making money doing the grind, so it's not recommended. You can do what you want, you can play this game however you want, but, you know, it's gonna kind of ruin a couple things for you. So, you know, for me, using the M1, I might end up switching to something else that I'm a little more comfortable with after I've gone through this ammo. I bought 250 rounds just to see if I could get through it and get used to it and see if it would work for me. I don't think it is. I'm 105 rounds in. I think we're going to be switching back to my 303 after this. Next we're going to talk about is your skills and your perks. There are certain skills and perks that can be especially helpful for grinding and just, you know, getting through huge amounts of animals in a fairly short amount of time. So this is another big zone of mine, which I don't mind getting into the stand and sitting still for a minute and talking. And I'll, you know, pull up my skills and I'll pull up my perks and we'll talk about some of the ones that are really, really important, in my opinion, for, you know, grinding animals. And, you know, these also depend on what you're grinding and how you're grinding them. If you're going to spend a lot of time with a bow, you might want some different perks for different reasons, you know? So as far as your skills and perks go, start with your skills. So this is the stalker category. It's the top category. As far as this goes, I would say tracking knowledge, right here, level 1, 2, and 3 are pretty good to have because that'll give you the animal's approximate weight and fur type. If you get up to the disturbed vegetation, animal's gender when you look at footprints and vocalizations, and it'll also give you information on how many animals are in the herd when you investigate the need zone tracks. And if you pick up blood trails, it'll give you the animal's approximate health. So those could be pretty helpful, but they're more so a base because of the way that the system for skills is tiered. You have to spend a certain amount of skill points per skill tier in order to unlock the next one. So I only have access to tier 4 because I've spent so many points here. I don't necessarily need all of these, but in order to have disturbed vegetation, it's pretty helpful. So other than your track knowledge, soft feet, both of them is really helpful. It reduces the noise that you generate when you're moving around. You've got improvised blind, which further decreases your invisibility when you're hiding inside of large bushes and shrubs, which being fully hidden does not reduce the hunting pressure. You will be more invisible on the ground than you could ever be in any hunting structure, but there is no reduction to hunting pressure if you are not in a hunting structure. Then the other thing that I would highly kind of recommend, the endurance. It increases your endurance, so your heart rate rises slower when you're moving and it falls faster when you're idle. So that means that I can go from, walking, running, to standing still, and my heart rate will come back to normal a lot faster than somebody who doesn't have that perk. Take a shot at this guy. Oh, got him. Well, we hit him twice, so he should go down somewhere. But as I auto-walk this way and reload, we're going to talk about the next tier. So we've got your ambusher. So, pull this up. There we go. So here's an example of the tiers. I have to spend 9 skill points in these 3 tiers to unlock tier 3, and then 13 to unlock tier 4. So as far as the ambusher perks, you're going to want your spotting knowledge, all 3, so you're going to want to see the additional information about how aware they are of nearby threats, which is, you and sometimes predators. Information about the approximate health of the animal, and information about the approximate trophy rating and weight of the animals. That trophy rating part of the tier 3, or level 3 of spotting knowledge, I think is super important, but, we'll get into that a little bit later. Another one that I personally like to use is sight spotting. That's huge. It means that I don't have to get my binoculars out to spot an animal to check, its trophy rating, its health, outline it, or anything. I can do that from my scope. There's no need for me to use my binoculars for that purpose. And then another one that you're going to want to look into, personally, not everybody, just me personally, is fatal attraction. I really like this one because it increases the chance of attracting animals to my location when using collars. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you're calling animals and half the herd responds? That can help with that. As well as level 2, there's an increased chance of them vocalizing when you use the collars. So that means I could use that collar and there's a, better chance of the animal responding, which makes it a lot easier to hunt some species, especially the quiet ones. Well, we got double lung and heart, so sometimes I can make great shots with the M1, just other times I miss completely. So we're gonna go down here at these 3 lakes. It is already 17:20. The mule deer drink zone time stops at 1700. 1700 flat. There are no longer slightly early, slightly late zones where it used to be for whitetail. They used to drink 8 to 10 or 8:30 to 10:30 for some zones. Now all zones will just be 8 to 10 even. Cut and dry. We like it a lot. It's no longer do I have a zone still drinking or did I miss something? I'm going to come back up here to this top zone. And then I'm going to reset time at the tent and show you the cost of resetting time. Just so you guys have an idea. And then we're going to start to go over the perks while I, sit up in a stand and wait for stuff to show up. So it is going to cost me 188 in-game dollars to change the time. I'm going to go back to just 14:23. I don't usually bother changing the minute unless it's like 59. Then I'll roll it over to like 05 or so. That way I'm not, losing out on basically an entire hour just because I want to change the time. The next thing that we're going to kind of cover is going to be your perks. So there are 4 different families of perks that you're going to want to look into. I do have one at least from each of them. So I'm going to get up here to where I want to sit. Put down my tripod. I do have a zone that comes up over here, so we're going to chill up here and wait for them while I talk about the perks. So in the rifles category, I have 5 perks that I wanted to talk about, and that's going to be muscle memory, breath control, zeroing, steady hands, and focused shot. So that is muscle memory. It increases the ready speed, and it unlocks the ability for you to ready your next shot without leaving aim mode for rifle, shotguns, and handguns, which means for, say, the bolt action 7mm, that means you can fire and rack in the next round without having to leave the aim down sights or looking through your scope. You don't have to leave that to rack the next round in. And then we're going to talk about breath control, which is up here at the top. And I have all 3 levels, and that decreases your aim wobble, increases the duration before you need to exhale when you're holding your breath, and there's a decreased heart rate penalty from exhaling, which reduces the cooldown until you can hold your breath again. And then another one to talk about is steady hands. It decreases your wobble in aim mode using any weapon, and each level unlocked increases the effect. So I basically have 3 levels of decreased aim wobble, but this one is specifically when I'm holding my breath. And then I have focused shot, which means holding my breath increases zooms when using rifles with iron, red dot, or holographic sights. And that's kind of helpful, so if I have a deer up close and I don't want to, say, take out this and use the scope if it's right underneath my stand, I can take off the scope and zoom, and it'll zoom in just a little bit for me to make that shot a little bit easier. Now, in the handguns category, I have 4 of them, but I'm only really going to talk about 3 because the other one's not all of that important to it. So I've got the sprint and load, which is probably the first perk that a lot of people will tell you to get when you start the game in general. It means that you can reload any weapon while you're running. You don't have to walk anymore to reload the weapon. Ranger, though, increases the accuracy when gauging distances of spotting animals. And that one goes hand in hand with the zeroing perk, and we'll get there in just a moment. So we've got lightning hands. Decreases the reload time of all weapons. Each level unlocked increases the effect. So if I were to fire a shot and I wanted to reload this, the original animation for this, the player struggles to get the clip into the gun for a second or 2. It's not much, but it does make a difference if I'm out of bullets and there are deer running and I want to get a follow-up shot. It's not huge, but it's a good difference. But here in the rifle thing, I did miss a bit. It's this, I don't know how I didn't have this. So in the rifles, the zeroing, this allows you to unlock the short and long range zeroing, because with a rifle, for the most part, your mid zeroing is what the standard is. So it's going to standard be at 150 meters. Once you get that perk, it unlocks the 75 and then the 300 for the second level. That is what I meant goes hand in hand with this. Increasing your accuracy when gauging distances of spotting animals. So using that ranger perk on top of having both of the zeroing abilities, that's going to really help you with not having to necessarily use the range finding binoculars if you don't have them. You can, spot an animal, get a pretty narrow estimate of how far away it is, and then you can use that to adjust your zeroing if you need to. Onto shotguns. So we're going to talk about body control, and then we're going to talk about recoil management. So body control means that weapon sights align faster after rotating with any weapon. Each level unlocked increases the effect. So if I had this and then I have my bow, that means that it takes me a little less time to go between here and the rifle. I could unlock another level to it and make it even faster. I just don't know how much that would impact it. Maybe I'll consider getting the perk. I could if I reallocate something in my archery. The other one in shotgun is going to be that recoil management. Less recoil when firing any weapon and able to fire a follow-up shot sooner. Each level unlocked increases the effect. Which that pieced with, say, the 308 Zarza AR from the modern rifle pack means that you're not going to get a whole lot of recoil, and that's a lot easier to get follow-up shots with. Alrighty, so I'm actually going to cut this video here because this is a good stopping point between learning everything there is about everything leading up to starting your grind. And then part 2 is going to actually release tomorrow, and that's going to have a lot more of the stuff that has to do with when you're actually in the process of grinding. So tomorrow we're going to cover hunting pressure, we're going to cover troubleshooting, we're going to cover all of those things. But this one, I figured this was a good stopping point where we were no longer going to be talking about everything that you kind of have to know ahead of time. And then from here, please give me any type of comment, question, you know, you can join the Discord. And I love getting so much feedback on my videos, whether that be like a personal message if you're one of my close friends, or you pop into a stream on YouTube or on Twitch and you ask me questions about a video that I've posted. I love seeing comments with questions. I love seeing comments with, you know, constructive criticism and all that kind of thing. I would really, really appreciate it from you guys if you would, you know, like the video, subscribe if you enjoyed your time here and you learned something today. You know, hit the bell for the notifications as usual. And without further ado, I will see you in the next one that does come out tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for hanging out with me. Bye.